All right, so it's 12:54 here Eastern time, and I'm just going to open up the room for students who are starting to show up. This is going to be our first meeting for Greek studies, so hopefully you're here for the right reason. We're not going to get started until after 1 o'clock, so you can leave your camera off, relax, get yourself ready for study, or just chat down in the text chat box. If you're already working in Greek studies, already enrolled in Greek reading or Greek grammar, you can let me know what lesson you're on. Just out of curiosity, you don't need to be in those courses yet. It's okay if this is your first time even thinking about Greek, but we'll get started in a few minutes and get rolling here. Again, to participate in this meeting today, still students coming in. To participate in this meeting today, you don't have to have any previous Greek studies. I'll start from scratch here, and we'll talk about everything in a few minutes. Still not even 1 o'clock yet. If you've got any questions about Greek studies or any related questions, feel free to post them in the text chat. We can just chat a bit before we get started around 1 o'clock. Hey there, Giovanni. Good to see you here. So I've just announced this meeting a week or so ago. We'll have a small group today, and I'll keep sharing information about it to try to increase the number of students who join us. Probably good for us to get started with a small group here. Our goal is to learn to read Greek and translate Greek as quickly as we can. So I'm going to try to help you to do it a little faster than we can do it through the normal lessons. Hello, Cecilia and Luke. Good to see you guys here. So just a few minutes. We've still got some students showing up. I think we had 15 or 16 registrations to meet, so we'll get started. Good small group to get rolling, and then hopefully we'll be reading Greek pretty quickly, and we'll go through translation work together and things like that. Now, when we get into this, make sure you're not afraid to ask questions. You know, I'm 48 years old, and I've been studying Greek since I was 19. So I've been doing this for 30 years now. If there's anything that I take for granted or talk about that you don't understand, make sure you flag me down and don't be afraid to ask questions. I try to be sensitive, but sometimes there may just be some little silly thing that I take for granted that you don't know what it means, and we need to explain that. I'll give you an example. When I was in middle school, I was in 7th grade, and I was taking Spanish, and I had a teacher who always used to say this phrase every day. She used to say this phrase, and she used to say, por ejemplo, por ejemplo, por ejemplo. And I sat there thinking to myself, I have no idea what she's saying. I don't know what that phrase means. And so finally, one day I asked her, I raised my hand and I said, what does por ejemplo mean? And she thought I was fooling around, and she gave me a detention, which is a punishment in school. So I got punished for asking what por ejemplo means, because she thought I was joking Whereas she used to say this phrase every day in Spanish class and just assume we knew what it meant. And I think I was the only kid who had the guts to admit I didn't know what the phrase meant. So that kind of thing, teachers can sometimes use phrases or assume things that the students don't know, and it's something simple. And you've just got to make sure if there's anything that I talk about or say that you don't know what I'm talking about, don't be afraid to ask, because I might be assuming something that I shouldn't be assuming. So ask any questions that come up. Feel free to ask them. Por ejemplo means for example. So she would be talking, and in Spanish, she'd be like, for example, por ejemplo, and she would just use that phrase, but she never told us what it meant. She just assumed that we knew what it meant, but we didn't. So things like that can happen, when a teacher is very comfortable with the subject and uses some phrases or words or talks about some things that she takes or he takes for granted that the kids don't know. So don't be afraid to ask. Okay. Sometimes that's the most important stuff. And we've got a lot to talk about in Greek. So it might be some ridiculous little thing you notice. And I'd like you to know that those questions are good questions. Let's see, we've got one more student coming in here. We'll just wait a couple more minutes just because it's the first class, and you know how registration and stuff can be a little clumsy when you first get started. See if anyone else shows up in the next minute or so. Yeah, James, I just want you guys to feel comfortable asking questions, even if you're just curious. Sometimes you might have a curious question that turns out to be an opportunity for me to explain something that I wouldn't even have thought of talking about that could be helpful. So don't be afraid to ask. And if you ask a dumb question, I'll just tell you it's a dumb question. So you don't have to worry. But usually I try to be sensitive to that stuff, but Greek is different. There's lots of stuff going on in Greek. So 102, yeah, we still have another student popping in here. If you're just joining us, relax. We haven't started yet. We'll get started in a couple minutes once I am sure that no one else is coming in. So just relax. What I asked before was if any of you have already been in Greek reading in the academy, if you just let me know what lesson you're on. I'm just curious. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have any Greek knowledge to get started here with me. We'll start from scratch today, and I think we'll get into this pretty quickly. We can do things in a live class that are very slow to do in an online course. So I think I can really help you guys get reading Greek quickly. Lesson 8 or 9 in reading. Yeah, no Greek knowledge. It's all right. It's good. It's good. Sometimes it's better to have no knowledge at all because you can start fresh and get off to a good start. And James, I'm sure even though you're up with lesson 8 or 9, I'm sure we'll get into some stuff that you don't know about, so don't worry about it. All right, so 103, I don't see anyone else coming in, so let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to do is meet on Thursdays to talk about our Greek studies. Remember that these live classes aren't meant to replace online courses, you know? So there's courses online that are really intended for you to study to get most of the information that you need for these lessons, and you're going to need to study those lessons to make progress, because I'm not going to teach everything from scratch. And also those lessons include assessments and things like that. So you really get to develop and test your mastery, keep records for your studies and things. So it's assumed that you're going to be working on the online courses. These courses are open to anyone who wants to study them. There's no age requirement. I don't care if you're 18 years old or 40 years old or 8 years old. You can learn Greek. Remember, there are people in the ancient world, Greek kids learned to read Greek, so it's obviously not difficult. So I don't care about age or ability or anything like that. You have to work at your own pace, but during these live classes, we'll go over the content of lessons and get into some details that I wouldn't add to an online lesson, because online lessons can get really messy and confusing if teachers try to include all the information in every lesson. So I try to keep the online lessons simple, and we can get into other stuff through these live classes. But it's assumed, like I said, that you're going to be studying these online classes. I'm going to share my screen here so you can see what I'd like to walk you through. Let me just get this going here. Give me a quick wave if you can see my screen okay. Can you see my screen? All right, good, thank you. So for Greek studies, you see there's two courses that I'm concerned with. Course number 331, Greek Reading 1, and 341, Greek Grammar 1. Those are the courses that if you want to study Greek, you should be enrolled in those two courses. I'm going to be talking about content in those courses. I'll probably go beyond what's in those courses in our live meetings, but that's where I want you. I want you making progress in those courses, not just wasting time with live class meetings. This is like a TV show. Those classes are real studies with quizzes and assignments where you're really going to master the content. These live classes are just meant to help you study those courses. So Greek Reading 1 and Greek Grammar 1. You'll also see that these are 300 level classes, and usually 300 level classes are intended for high school students. But like I said, if you're willing to study and do the work at your own pace, there's no reason why, if you're a younger student, you can't make progress in those courses. And you can use these live course meetings as times to ask questions and things like that. So if you are younger and you run into something in those lessons that's a little difficult, just ask about it in our live class meetings. Okay, so Greek Reading 1 and Greek Grammar 1, those are our main Greek study courses. And I can promise you that if you study those courses carefully, within a few months, you'll be reading Greek. So it's very simple. When I was a student, I didn't study Latin and Greek until I was in college, but when I got started, I always thought Greek was a lot easier than Latin. So if you've been in Latin reading and you're doing okay in Latin reading, hold on, we have another student coming in here. If you've been doing okay in Latin reading, I think you're going to find that Greek, for some reason, it always seemed to me to be a little easier. Okay, so we'll actually start reading some Greek today. Even if you've never seen Greek before, I'll show you how easy it is, and we'll get started with real Greek reading in just a minute. So the first thing is, just for courses, I'd like you to be enrolled in Greek Reading 1 and Greek Grammar 1. I'd like you to start with Greek Reading 1. And that might sound crazy, but as I'll show you, it's really not that hard. Now, the reason why I tell students to start with reading before grammar is just think about your own experience with English. How did you learn English? You didn't start with grammar, right? You started by just being immersed in the language, walking around the house, pointing to things and naming them, copying phrases you heard from your parents and siblings. You're just immersed in the language, and that's how you become familiar with it. You start to learn vocabulary and things like that. And that's the purpose of a reading course. We're just immersing ourselves in the language and learning to get used to the language, to hear the language, to read the language, and so on. And then later on, you got into school years, 8, 9, 10 years old. And that's when you started learning grammar and things like that. So grammar doesn't come first. Many people like to pretend grammar should come first, but grammar doesn't come first. You need to have something to work with before you start studying grammar rules and definitions. So that's why we start with Greek reading first. At the same time, when you start like that, there's going to be lots of stuff that you see in a reading course that you don't understand. And my advice is, just don't be annoying, right? Just be patient, because there's a lot of stuff that you're going to understand over time. Just like when you were a kid, if you've got a little toddler, brother or sister, or even a child, You know that those little kids go around saying phrases and using words that they don't understand. They just copy them, and that's normal. So just be patient with your studies. Get started with reading. Do what's required in the lessons. If you have questions or want or are curious about things, that's what live class time is for. So we can talk about anything like that. But just be patient because we're going to learn everything when we go through Greek grammar. So those two courses. Now, as far as Greek reading is concerned, what I want to show you here, if I open up Greek reading, at the beginning of the course, so before you even get to the lessons, there's a series of videos that I made. You can see how to read Greek, learning the letter names, how to read Greek, learning the sounds of the letters, how to read Greek, reading syllables, how to read Greek, aspiration, accents, etc. Those videos will lead you through everything that you need to know know the names of all the letters, to know the sounds of the Greek letters, and to actually begin reading Greek. Okay, so before you even get to lesson 1, which starts with the first verses of the Gospel of John, you've got a few videos to study before that, which will teach you all of the basics. And I'm going to go over some of this stuff in our class today because we're on here live together, and I think I can even make it easier than it is in those videos. So we'll look at the letters and their names and their sounds and even start reading Greek today during this meeting. But I just want you to know that I go through all of this stuff in detail in those videos. So if you want to get started, start there. Go through those videos one at a time. Make lists of any questions you have as you go along. If you run into anything you don't understand or struggle with, just make lists of questions and either email them to me or bring them to these live class meetings and we'll talk about them. So get started with those videos. And then once you're comfortable, you can identify the letters, you know their names, you know their sounds, you can read Greek syllables and things like that. Then you're really ready to get started reading the Gospel of John. That might sound crazy, but it's not. So if we just look here, this is the text of the first 5 verses of the Gospel of John. And you can see it's a totally different alphabet, right? We have to learn all these different letters. You know, you'll hear people use the phrase, it's all Greek to me. This is what it means, right? We look at Greek and you can't even tell what it says. It's all Greek to me. It's a different alphabet. We've got to learn these letters. We've got to learn these sounds. You can see there's lots of symbols and stuff around the letters, and we've got to learn what they all mean. And it's really very simple. We'll actually get into this today a little bit. So we've got some challenge just learning to read the Greek alphabet and learn how to read the words, just like you're 5 years old and you're learning to read English words. We're sort of going through that process again, but it's going to be easy because you're older and it's really not complicated. So we'll get into this in a minute. All right. So we'll be reading real Greek, no fake Greek, no made up stories, no cat in the hat in Greek or anything like that. We're going to read real Greek right from the beginning and just jump right into it. Now, think about it. If you're able to read Greek, if you learn to read Greek, you really have an incredibly valuable language because sometimes people think of Greek and they think of like the ancient Greek. So they'll think of Aristotle and Plato and people like that. And that's true. You can read Homer in the original language. You can read Aristotle and Plato. You can read Greek playwrights like Sophocles and Aeschylus, all of these famous Greek authors. And that's awesome. But the even more important use of Greek is that the New Testament was originally written by the apostles in Greek. So it was actually inspired by God in the Greek language. And not only does it give you access to the original text of the New Testament of the Bible, it also gives you access to the writings of the early church fathers who were often Greek speakers, like St. John Chrysostom. We can think of people like St. Augustine and later like St. Thomas Aquinas, doctors of the church who wrote in Latin, but earlier church fathers wrote in Greek. So it gives you access to those authors as well. So everything from Homer in the ancient world, all the way through the Greek church fathers, including the Greek New Testament. You can have direct access to those texts, which is really an incredible benefit for lifelong studies. Very few people study Greek, and after you start learning it, you're going to wonder why, because it's really not difficult. So anyway, it's not just Christian studies that it's valuable for. It's also valuable for philosophy studies and literature studies. But at the same time, it's not just valuable for literature studies and philosophy studies. It's also valuable for Christian studies. So it's such a great language that gives you access to so many different writings and authors. And once you get into it, you know, I think it's a language that you'll enjoy, and it's also you know, it's fun to show off a little bit because it's a language that other people can't even read. So anyway, we'll get to this in a minute. We'll start reading Greek together. The other course that I want you to study is Greek grammar, and let me just get back up to the top here. The Greek grammar course, I'm designing it to take you very slowly and very carefully, one article at a time, through a Greek grammar textbook that's written in English that covers every single detail of the Greek language. And I'm setting it up so you can just work slowly, one article at a time, through the whole book. And you can see how I've got that set up. There's quizzes in here. There will be videos in here, written assessments. I'm really designing the grammar course to lead you very slowly and carefully through every single point, which I think will be best for you as you go along. But like I said, we're going to get started with reading, and I want to get right to that. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Gospel of St. John. Now, I know some of you said, well, I have no experience in Greek. That's all right, because we're going to work on it here together. So our challenge, the challenge for us, you know, when you ask, well, how do I know if I'm doing well? How do I know if this class is effective? Well, the test is very simple. I'm not going to give you fake quizzes and tests and grades because, you know, I can make up a fake Greek class, and we can all pretend we're studying Greek. Like some people, some schools pretend they're studying Latin, and the kids can't read anything. Well, here's our test. This is the Greek text. This is the test for whether or not we're learning Greek well or not. Now, one thing that I want to encourage you to practice, okay? I want you to practice what's called transliteration. Transliteration is where you take the Greek words and you turn them into English letters, okay? You don't need to do that to read Greek, but when you're learning the language, it's good practice for you to just, you know, test yourself on recognizing the letters and understanding the letters in English that they represent. But also, it will help you recognize Greek sources in English words. So when you look at English words, if you get used to transliterating Greek words into English letters, it'll help you to recognize those Greek words in English words. And I'll give you some examples. Let me just open up a, give me 1 second here. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second to open up another window so I can get a Google Doc open. And I'll show you what I mean by transliteration exercises. Just a second here. Okay. So let's say I take a word like, let me just take this first phrase, and I'm going to stick it into a Google Doc. Hopefully you can follow me here. Oops. And I'll blow it up nice and big. And you can see the text looks wacky because you've got to get a good font. Choose like Times New Roman or Arial or something like that. Times New Roman gives you this, you know, book-looking font. If you want something even clearer, use Arial. If you use Arial, it'll be even clearer sometimes. You might find that clearer. I like to use this font called Cambria, but it does make a difference. Some fonts can't really present the Greek letters without making them all wacky and different sizes and stuff. But transliteration simply means we look at the words and we turn them into English letters like this. Okay, that's transliteration. Actually, I made a mistake there. That's transliteration. We simply take Greek words and we turn them into English letters. So here we have the Greek letter epsilon, which is equivalent to an English letter E. Here we have the Greek consonant nu, which is equivalent to the English consonant N. So once I transliterate it, I can easily read that this is N. All right, N. Then we've got this second word. The first letter is alpha, and that transliterates into English as the letter A. The second letter in this word is the Greek letter rho, which is like the English R. Then we've got this consonant chi. It's spelled C-H-I. That is actually turned into CH in English. So that letter chi or ki becomes CH. And then we've got this letter, which is eta, and it is equivalent to a long E. So if I want to be exact, I can actually go to special characters and just use this little drawing thing to find a long E. Is that a long E? Yeah, I can use a long E. So if I want to be exact, I could do it like that. So the epsilon is a short E and the eta is a long E. Then you also see there's this little symbol underneath the eta there. That's actually a iota, which is like an English I. But you see it's written underneath. So what you can do is take that I and go to format text and make it subscript like that. Now, if you're new to this, obviously this is complicated, but what I'm showing you is over time, we're going to practice this and get comfortable doing this. And it's going to help you get used to not only the Greek language, but also seeing what Greek looks like in English letters. So now, for example, if I take an English word like archaeology, and I say, well, where does the word archaeology come from? Well, we can see from this first phrase in the Gospel of John where archaeology comes from. Here we've got arche in Greek, and here we've got arche in the beginning of this word, and here we've got logos in the Greek, logos, and we see that at the end of this word. So we can see archaeology is built from these two words, arche and logos. And the transliteration helps us to see that. Do you understand? Do you see what I'm saying? How transliteration can help you to see where the English words are coming from in terms of Greek origins? So that's why I like to have students practice transliteration. It's just a good exercise, and it helps us to focus on all the details. So when I say transliteration, this is what I mean. And it'll take some time for you to get used to it, but we're going to practice it in every lesson. If you look at the Greek reading lessons, you'll see I've actually added an exercise to each lesson, a transliteration exercise, and it just asks you to copy the Greek text and transliterate it. So when you get started, those are going to be slow exercises to work through. It's going to take you some time. You'll probably get some things wrong when you do them in the beginning, but over time, you're going to get more and more accurate, and then you're going to get faster and faster until it's really easy and you can do it quickly. I mean, obviously, I can do it very quickly because I've been studying it for 30 years. So anyway, the Gospel of John here, the first thing we want to learn to do is just identify the Greek letters and learn how to read the text. As I said, in the Greek reading course, there's videos that walk you through all the details of this, but I'd like to just go through this together just so you can see what you're going to need to be able to do. So you have a goal for your studies, okay? So here we have the first 5 verses of the Gospel of John. In the text chat, real quick, let me know yes or no if you're studying Latin reading. Real quick, yes or no. Are you studying Latin reading? Yes or no? All right. Mostly yes. Okay. Now, the reason why I ask that, again, you don't have to, but the reason why I ask that is because if you are studying Latin reading and you know the translation, or if you know the Latin text of verses 1 through 5 of the Gospel of John in Latin, you're going to be amazed to see that the Greek words here align perfectly with the Latin words. They match up one by one, and the translation is very, very easy. And I just want to show you this and walk through this. So if you're not studying Latin, just bear with me. But for those of you who are, follow me here. The very first word in Greek is en. What's the very first word in Latin? Go ahead and chat it for me. In. So en is the Greek equivalent of the Latin in. The next word we have in Greek is arche. Arche. What's the second word in Latin? In Latin, principio. Okay. So arche is the second word here in the Gospel of John in Greek. The second word in Latin is principio, and that's what arche means. Arche means beginning. Then we've got a verb, ein, and it's the third word here in the text. What's the third word in the Latin text of the Gospel of John? Erat. Very good. It means was, and that's what ein means. And then we've got this phrase here, ho logos, and ho in Greek just means the, so it's not really a separate word. Ho logos, what's the next word in Latin? Verbum, right. Ho logos means verbum, or the word. So en arche, ein ho logos is equivalent to in principio erat verbum. And as simple as that is, if you already know the Latin, that's how all of these verses are. The whole passage is that simple. So if you're familiar with the Latin text, remember the Latin text is simply Saint Jerome's translation of the Greek text. And when Saint Jerome translated the Greek text, he kept it almost exactly word for word, because Saint Jerome knew that this Greek text was inspired by God. And Saint Jerome believed that not just the words or the ideas were inspired, but even the order of the words was inspired. And so when he translated from Greek into Latin, he said, I'm not going to mess around with word order. I'm going to translate it word by word and keep the original word order. So the Latin text matches the word order of the Greek almost exactly. The only time it changes is when there's an idea expressed in Greek and there's no Latin word for that. And so Saint Jerome has to come up with a way to articulate a certain idea. He doesn't have a simple word to do it. And I'll show you a couple examples as we go through this. But anyway, if you know the Latin text, it's very, very easy to translate, because you can sort of cheat and use your knowledge of Latin to figure out the meaning of the Greek words. If you don't know the Latin, you just have to study it from scratch, so it takes a little more effort. But anyway, we have this first phrase here, and I want you to pay attention to the letters and to the symbols and to pronunciation, because this is what's going to take the most time for us, just getting comfortable with the language. So this first word here is en. You can see it's uppercase epsilon is the Greek letter. And then this letter that looks like a V is actually like an English N. It's the letter nu in Greek. So this first word is en, en. The second word, I transliterated it before, but you see the first letter is alpha, so it's A. Then we have ro, which is like an English R, sorry, but it's trilled like Spanish r. So it's ar, ar. Then we've got ki, which is pronounced like CH in chorus, like ka, 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 right? It's a ka sound with a breath. So we have arc, arc. And then we have eta, which is like a long Latin e, arche, arche. Now you see there's a symbol above this alpha. That symbol tells us that we just read the alpha by itself. And I'll show you why that's important, because here, if you look at this letter, you see the same symbol, but it's facing in the opposite direction. This tells us, when we see this, it's a breathing mark. It tells us we have to add a breath before that vowel. So this symbol tells us there's no breath before the vowel. This symbol tells us there is a breath before the vowel. So this is pronounced ah, just simple ah, where this is pronounced ho, and we add breath to the vowel. So the first mark that you're going to see are called breathing marks. They're breathing marks. This means no breath. This means breath. Okay, I tell students to remember that the mark that's shaped in the direction of a letter C is the breathing mark that means breath. If it's like a backwards C, no breath. All right, so that's what that mark means. That'll always be at the beginning of a word, never later in a word. But that's a breathing mark. Then what you see over this eta, you see this little squiggly thing. That's an accent mark. That's one kind of accent mark. Yeah, the name of this symbol, Giovanni wrote a tilde. That little squiggly thing, the name for that mark is a tilde. That's what the symbol is called. But in Greek, what that symbol means is what's called a circumflex accent. And you'll learn this in Greek grammar, so don't worry about that. But what it means is when we read this vowel, we accent, we go up, and then we come back down on that same vowel. So that symbol tells us when we read the sound a, we're going to go up and down. So we're going to go a, like that, up and down. That's what that tilde symbol means. So if you listen carefully when I read the word, you'll hear arche, 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 because of that accent mark. In some texts, you won't see that tilde. You'll just see sort of like an upside down V, which is called a caret. You'll see it just goes up and down. That marks that same accent, okay? So you've got the breathing mark over that first letter, and then you've got an accent mark over that last letter. And this little iota underneath the eta, that's called a iota subscript, which just means iota written under the vowel. And you don't pronounce that. Back in the old days, that used to be written next to this vowel, but it's not pronounced. And so in the Middle Ages, when the scribes were, copying the books and things like that, that letter wouldn't even be in the text, but the scribes knew that it was supposed to be there, and it would have been there in older texts. And so they just wrote it in as a little subscript to show you that the ending of that word in ancient Greek would have been eta iota, but now it's read just with the eta. So when you see that little iota underneath, that's important because it's part of the ending, but it doesn't get pronounced. So you don't need to worry about reading it. It's really just so you can recognize the form of a word for grammar, okay? So there's lots of information there, but it's not too complicated. We see a breathing mark at the beginning. We see an accent mark at the end there. And then we see a iota subscript, a little iota written under a vowel that we can really ignore until we study grammar, all right? So that word is pronounced arche, arche. The next word here, we see that same vowel, eta, and we see two marks above it. So it gets a little wacky looking, but it's just these same two marks. We see the breathing mark that tells us that there's no breath, just like we saw over the alpha back here. And then we see the accent mark, just like we saw here. So it's just those two marks joined together over this eta. And so what that means is we're going to read the sound e, which is the sound of that vowel. There's no breath before it. And we're going to read it with that up and down circumflex accent. E. And then at the end, we find the consonant nu, just like we saw back here, which we said is like an N. So this word is going to be pronounced ein. Okay? So these first three words, we have en, arche, ein. En, arche, ein. Next, we've got the Greek vowel omicron, which means small o, omicron, like micro means small, like micro, right? Omicron means small o. Later on, we're going to see the big O, but this is the Omicron, and we see it's got a rough breathing mark above it. So we're going to add breath before the vowel sound and say ho. Very good, Giovanni. So it's like ho. And you guys can feel free to do that. If you want to take a guess at the transliteration and try to get it right, you can do that. That's probably something good for you to do while you're listening. So that would be read as ho, ho. It's the breathing, the rough breathing with the vowel omicron, which is like the English O, ho. This next word begins with this figure, which is the lambda, lambda in Greek, and it's equivalent to the English letter L, okay? The letter L, then we see this omicron again. We see above it a different mark. This is another accent mark. This is an acute accent mark, and it means we're going to stress this syllable. So in this word, we're going to stress this first syllable, and I'll show you what that sounds like in a minute. So we've got the lambda, which is like an English L. We've got omicron, which is like a Latin O. Then we've got this, it looks like an English Y, but it's not a Y, it's the gamma, gamma in Greek. It makes the sound of G, like God, G, G. So we've got lo, then we've got go, and at the end, this is the sigma, makes the sound of the letter S. So we've got logos, logos, and you can hear the stress on that first omicron where we have the accent mark, logos, logos. So we've got our first phrase, en arche ein ho logos. En arche ein ho logos. And that's all we've got to do. So the first thing we've got to learn is just to read the letters, read the symbols, let them guide our pronunciation. It's a lot easier than Latin because when you're reading Latin, you usually don't get any help with pronunciation. Whereas Greek, we always have the pronunciation guide right in the words in terms of all the marks that are given. So it makes it much easier to read. All right, en arche ein hologos. Here's what I'd like you to do real quick. In the text chat, I'd like you to try to transliterate this, okay? Take that first phrase, en arche ein hologos, and try to write it with English letters. Go ahead and see how well you do. En arche ein hologos. Write it in English letters. En arche ein hologos. That's good, James. Cecilia is perfect except for one thing. What's the one thing that Cecilia needs to fix? George, yours looks good. Yeah, Cecilia, you're right. Sorry, I didn't see that. You already corrected it. Good. Good, good. Adel, you made the same mistake that Cecilia made. Just get that fixed up. And Luke's, yours looks good. Henry, yours looks good. Okay. Now, your ability to do that is really 50% of what you need to do to learn to read Greek. Okay. James, you've got a couple things to fix up in that second word. Just look at some of the other kids' examples and you'll see what's different. And then that fourth word should be ho, not just o. Okay. But like I said, this is the first challenge, okay? The first challenge is learning to recognize the Greek letters and understand how they would be written in English or Latin. And once you can do that, you can start reading. All right, let's move on to the next phrase. We have this letter kappa. Follow me here. We have kappa, which is like an English K, very simple. Looks like a K, it is like a K. Makes the sound k. Then we've got alpha, which is like in father. And then we've got iota, which is like E in machine. Now, alpha and iota here form a diphthong. Who can tell me what a diphthong is? What's a diphthong? Alpha, iota make a diphthong. What's a diphthong? Very good, George. Two vowels that make one sound. So we read these two sounds together, and you're going to learn that in Greek grammar. So if you don't know where I got that from, just relax. It's going to be studied in grammar. Very good, James. So we read these two sounds, a and e, together quickly. So instead of saying a, e, we say I. We read them together, all right? So that next word is kai, kai, kai. And you see there's another mark here. It's a downward accent mark. And really, most grammar teachers will tell you that you can just ignore that. It tells you that there's not an accent on that syllable, okay? It's like how the first breathing mark tells you that there's no breathing. Some people say that this accent, this downward pointing accent, tells you that there's no accent. I think there's a little more to it than that. What I would argue is there's sort of a it's hard to explain this unless you read music, but imagine if we had one note that was like the normal note for the whole line of sounds. And then an acute accent means you go up a note. I would argue that this accent means you go down a note. Okay, so it's like you take a little stress off the normal speech, so a little less stressed than normal speech. All right. Yeah, if you read music, Greek is actually very musical. Like you think about the accent marks, it's really like moving up and down in the notes. It's not really stress, even though I'll say stress. That's just because of English. We think of accent as stress, but really the Greek language is like a musical language. It's like the accent really means like a higher pitch. You go up pitch and down pitch, and then you go down further in pitch. So it's a little musical. But for most students getting started, especially if they can't read music, that can be too much to try to take in. So I usually don't talk about that much. But if you do read music, you can think about it sort of as a musical line. So think about that word arche. If you think about it musically, it's like arche, arche, sort of going up a note and coming back down to the main note. So en arche ein hologos. It's more musical. So then we've got this word kai, kai with this accent. This is called a grave accent. So now you can read music thinking of Greek. Yeah, just make sure you get it in the right direction, right? You read Greek thinking of music. Don't take Greek into your music. So we have kai, then we have ho again. We have hologos again. We already read that back here. Hologos. We have hologos again. Then we've got the verb ein again. We've already seen that before. Ein. So we've got kai, ho, logos, ein. This is the Greek letter P or pi. In English, we say pi, but really in Greek pronunciation, it would be P. It's just P-I. P, it makes the P sound. We then have the letter ro, which is like an R, but it's got that Spanish trilled sound to it, r. We've then got the omicron and the sigma, just like we had at the end of logos. So we have os. So we put these together and we have pros, pros. The next letter here is a tau, which is like an English T. It looks like a T. It is a T. Tau. Then we've got O, omicron again. And then we've got nu, n again. So this is ton, pros, ton. Then this letter here is the theta, theta in Greek. It's like TH in English. We pronounced it with the TH sound. Then we've got epsilon. Here we saw the uppercase epsilon. Here we see the lowercase epsilon. And then we've got the os ending again, just like logos. So we've got theos, theos. But before we get any further, how about transliterate for me this line here, this phrase. Kai hologos ein proston theon. Transliterate that for me. We'll see how you do here. Kai hologos ein proston theon. So now you can see that most of you get the letters right, but if you want to be a little more perfect, you want to try to also get that pronunciation stuff in there. you can figure out some creative ways to do that. You know, sometimes when you're just in a text box like this, it's difficult. When you're on a Word doc or a Google Doc, it's a little easier. But Kai hologos en prostontheon. That's good. So Luke's got that looking good. George got a one problem in the middle there. Kai hologos en proston. Adel's looks good. Kai hologos en prostontheon. James is getting a little fancy with a C at the end there. Make sure you know that's a sigma. Giovanni, Kai hologos en prostontheon. That looks good. All right. So good. You're getting the hang of this. Okay, so let's keep going here. So we've got to read this, en arche ein hologos, kai hologos ein pros ton theon. Now I said before that this matches up word for word with the Latin, so let me prove that again. Okay, we had in principio erat verbum. What's the next word in the Latin text after verbum? After in principio erat verbum, what's the next word? Et. Very good. The Greek word kai is equivalent to the Latin et. It means and. Kai. Then we've got hologos again. What was the Latin equivalent for hologos? Verbum. Then we've got ein. What's the next word in Latin? Kai hologos, or et verbum. What's the next word in Latin? Et verbum erat. Very good, Henry. James wrote not erat. I don't know what that means. Erat is the right answer. Then we've got pros in Greek. So we have et verbum erat. What's the next word in Latin? Apud. Very good, James. Very good. Apud. Pros is equivalent to the Latin apud. What does apud mean? What does apud mean in Latin? With. And that's how pros is translated here. And then we've got ton theon. Ton is just an article that means the. Ton theon. What's the next word in Latin? Deum. Good. Apud deum. Pros ton theon. So what I want you to see is that the Greek words line up exactly with the Latin words because St. Jerome translated the Greek and he did so word for word. So if you're familiar with the Latin text, Greek is as easy as can be to read the Gospel of John, okay? So en arche ein hologos, kai hologos ein proston theon. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Now, remember in Latin, right, you translate that and say, in the beginning was erat verbum, and we translate verbum, the word, and you wonder, well, why would I say the word? This is why we say the word, because in English, we have a word for this Greek article, whereas in Latin, they don't have a word for it. So there's no translation of that into Latin, but in English, we do have an article, so we translate it. Okay, so even when we translate the Latin into English, to make it sound proper in English, we add things that are actually present in the Greek text, okay? So anyway, we've got en arche ein hologos, kai hologos ein proston theon. And then we've just got a bunch of repeats here, so it gets easy. We've got kai again, just like we had before, kai. We've got theos, which is a different form of the same word we saw, theon, theos. We've got ein again, and then we've got hologos. And that brings us to the end of verse 1. So if you're totally new to this, I'm sure that was, to some degree overwhelming maybe, but that's all that there is. It's really, there's no other like secret hidden information that you're going to need to learn. You just need to learn to identify the letters, to understand what English letters or Latin letters they represent. You need to know what these symbols mean that are on the letters. They're just breathing marks and accent marks. And then slowly, you need to put that all together and learn to read the language, okay? It's really not difficult, just takes a little bit of time in the beginning, and with some practice, you'll get better and better, okay? Now, let me ask you this. Who would like to try and read this for us? Anybody want to go on audio and read this for us? That's voluntary. You don't have to. I'm not going to call on anybody. Going to practice the golden rule. James, you want to try to read it? Yeah, unmute yourself. You can give it a try. So we'll read all of verse 1, okay? I'll go, actually, you know what? To make it easier, I'll go one word at a time, all right? I'll highlight a word, you read it.
N.
Go ahead. Yeah, good. N. Go ahead, I'm ready for you.
Arche.
Good. Arche. Just go as fast as you can.
N.
Good.
Hologos.
Good. Keep going.
Kai.
Good.
Kai. Hologos.
Very good.
N.
Good.
Pros. Ton. Theon.
Good.
Kai. Theos.
Theos. Good.
N.
Mm-hmm. Say that one.
Logos.
Hologos. Very good. Anybody else want to try? Thank you, James. Anybody else want to try? Henry, you want to give it a shot? Let me know if you want to try. I saw you write that once, but let me just make sure you want to do it. You want to give it a try? Anybody else want to give it a try? All right, Henry, let me find you here. I'll give you a shot. I got to find you and open up your microphone. 1 second. All right, Henry, I'll highlight the words. You read them whenever you're ready, okay?
Ein.
Okay, pretty good.
Arche.
Good. Arche.
Ein.
Ein.
Hologos.
Very good.
Kai.
Good.
Hologos.
Good.
Ein.
Good.
Pros. Ton. Theon.
Yeah, just get that accent. Get that accent. Try that again.
Theon.
Theon. Right? You hear that? You hear that accent goes up at the end there? Not theon. Theon. Try that.
Theon.
Good. Okay.
Kai.
Good.
Theos.
Now this is the opposite. It goes down, right? Theos.
Theon.
Good. Keep going.
Ein.
Good.
Hologos.
Very good. Easy as can be. Thank you. Very good. Anybody else want to give it a try? Yeah, Cecilia, ready? I'll highlight the words. Just take your time. Read it when you're ready, okay?
All right. N,
Good.
Arche,
Very good.
N,
Okay, now let me just say this for all of you. You can see that these two words here, N and ein, are similar. So when you read them, just try to make a distinction between those two words. This one has a shorter S sound. Sorry. This one has a shorter S sound. This one has a little longer E sound, okay? So try that again, Cecilia.
Ein,
Good.
Hologos,
Good.
Kai,
Good.
Hologos,
Good.
Ein,
Good.
Pros,
Good.
Ton,
Very good.
Theon,
Very good.
Kai,
Good.
Theos,
Good.
Ein,
Good.
Hologos.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Let me just mute Cecilia there. Thank you, Cecilia. Anybody else want to give it a try? Yeah, that was good, Cecilia. Very good. Everybody's been good so far. So good. George, you want to go? Yeah, let me find you on here. Hold on a minute. I just have to open up your microphone. All right, George, unmute yourself. Can you stick a pair of headphones in there? Because it's like feeding back. Or just turn the volume down.
It's not me. There.
And what's happening is the speaker somewhere is getting picked up by the microphone. That's why it makes that crazy sound.
Can you turn yours down?
Yeah, is your brother sitting next to you with the microphone
Yeah.
open? Yeah.
Yes.
So it's his fault.
Put your headphones in. Ennis.
There you go.
better?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds good. All right, go ahead.
N
Good.
Arche
Very good.
Ein
Good.
Hologos
Very good.
Kai
Mm-hmm.
Ologos
Good.
Ein
Good. Sorry, my highlighting skills are challenged here. Go ahead.
Pros
Good.
Ton
Mm-hmm.
Theon
Mm-hmm.
Kai
Mm-hmm.
Pros. Sorry, no, Theos.
Good, very
Sorry.
good. It's okay.
Ein
Good.
Hologos.
Okay, very good. You know, it's really that simple. It just takes some time to get started, and once you get the hang of it, it's not that big of a deal. Anybody else want to give it a try? I'm not going to make fun of you if you mess up. I'm going to help you, so don't be afraid. Anybody else want to give it a try here? That's okay. Don't worry about it, George. Anybody else want to give it a try? So that's what we've got to do. And like I said, all of this is explained for you. Let me just show you real quick. If you go to Greek reading, the Greek reading course, and you see these videos here, like how to read Greek letter names, you'll see that these videos take you through all the details. I don't know if you'll be able to hear this or not, but you see I walk you through the whole alphabet. Okay, so my point here is just showing you that if you want to go through this slowly on your own, it's okay if you can't hear it. All I want you to see is I go through the whole entire alphabet, every single letter, the names of every letter, the sounds of every letter. We practice reading Greek syllables. So if you're just getting started here and you don't feel comfortable doing that, you know, just go through those videos. Take your time. You can learn all the details. And then during these live classes, I'll always give you some time to practice. You can practice reading and, you know, we can make fun of you when you mess up and stuff like that. But practice on your own privately, learn, you know, as much as you can. And when you start to think that you've got it, when we have our live classes, you can volunteer to read and we'll put you to the test, okay? So that's it. We're going to read real Greek. You know, that's the first verse of the Gospel of John. It's really not complicated, but we'll work on it each week. We'll do the translations together. We'll constantly practice pronunciation and reading. I'll give you some fun, you know, challenging quizzes during our live classes on vocabulary, things like that. We'll practice transliteration. And after a couple of weeks, I think it's going to be pretty easy. And then it's just a matter of going through those online lessons and building your vocabulary, learning the grammar. And once some of you get into the grammar, we'll talk about grammar a bit in our live meetings, but that's what we'll do each Thursday, okay? So work on these courses on your own, make as much progress as you can, and then come to live classes and we'll practice all of the reading and stuff like that, okay? Yeah, that's what you need, I think, as a student. You know, to have live classes and to have no private study is sort of a waste of time. It's best to actually study privately and really focus on all the details by yourself, and then to come together as a group and just, you know, just get help practicing what you've already studied, okay? Giovanni, I don't know why you're writing some random things. Do you have a question or something? You guys have questions? I see, you know, random letters being posted to the chat. Any questions that you've got thus far? Anything you see here that you feel like I didn't explain? Did I miss anything? Okay, Giovanni, that's good. So what's the difference between Omicron and Omega? Well, let me show you some examples. All right, so here in the word logos, we've got two Omicrons, and Omicron just means small o. It doesn't mean short o, so don't say short. It's just small o, okay? It's just a brief o sound, like o, short o. But then omega, if I can find one, here's one. Omega means great O or big O or large O, and it's like a longer O sound. So whereas Omicron is O, Omega is O, O. It's just a longer sound. It's just like epsilon is a small e, and eta is a long e. Same thing, all right? So we've got a short version of that sound and a long version of that sound with e, and we've got a short version of o and a long version of o, omega. All right. But that's it. So the vowels, just real quick, I'll show you all the vowels. We've got alpha, that's the first vowel, a. Then we've got eta. Oh no, let me make sure I know my alphabet. Epsilon will be the second one. We saw epsilon here in theon. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta. Eta is the next one. That's this long e. Then we've got iota, which makes e. Theta, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, xi, omicron is the next one. Upsilon, we see an upsilon here, but that's not a good example. Let me see if I can find a good upsilon. Find a good upsilon. There might not be a good upsilon. Anyway, the upsilon, which you can see, it looks like an English U. It's pronounced with the sound u, which is a French sound. It's not a regular English sound. U, you can just say u if you want. And then omega is the last vowel. O, the big O. All right. Yeah, it's 2 o'clock now. So if you need to get going, feel free. I'm not going to introduce any new stuff, but we'll meet again next Thursday. I hope that's helpful. Get working on these courses by yourself and then bring that knowledge to our meetings on Thursday and we'll put it all to work, okay? If you've got any questions, I'll hang around here. Otherwise, you're free to go and I'll see you next week or at our one of our next classes, okay? Thanks for coming, guys. God bless. Any questions, though, I'm here. I'll hang around and be on chat for a little while. But everybody's free to go. Any questions? You can just chat any questions before we wrap up. I'll hang out as long as you have questions. If you don't, you can actually let me know if you have no questions and we'll just wrap up here. Any lingering questions? I'll turn my sharing off. Thank you guys for volunteering to read. You all did well. Any other questions? Giovanni's got no questions. Any other questions about Greek or Greek studies or language studies in general? Feel free. While you've got me, make use of me. Yeah, go ahead, ask a question. What Greek supplements do you suggest using? You mean like dictionaries and stuff like that? Yeah. Well, I can show you the Greek dictionary I use right here next to me. This is an old Greek dictionary. You can see it's all torn up. I've had this since I was 19 years old. So this is the only dictionary I've ever had. But you can see this is published by Oxford Press. This one's expensive though. You know, this costs like $50. So I don't necessarily want to recommend this because it's expensive. Like I said, I bought this in college. I've had this since I was a teenager. But that's the main Greek. You see, it's called a lexicon and not a dictionary. Usually a lexicon is a dictionary for a language that isn't adding new words, so it's not going to be updated. So this is a Greek English lexicon. It's by Liddell and Scott. You see the author's names on there, and it's published by Oxford. But you can find this online. This same dictionary has been put online. So if you just search online for Liddell and Scott Greek Dictionary online, you can find an online copy of this that you can search. It's very hard to search though, because it's Greek, you know, it's hard to search a dictionary when it's a different language. What I would recommend though, what you might want to do is you can also get a PDF copy of this. If you go to like archive.org, you can get a PDF copy of this dictionary and just use it on your computer and just use it like a printed dictionary. So that's what I'd recommend for that. Of course, in our reading courses, you're not going to need to use a dictionary, so you don't need to worry about that. But I'd recommend that. The Greek grammar textbook that I teach is called Smith's Greek Grammar. It's spelled with a Y, S-M-Y-T-H, Smith's Greek Grammar. So between those two courses, you really don't need anything. I really don't know what other resources would be necessary. You just need time. You need to do the work. Okay. You don't need a whole lot. But that dictionary, like I said, can be found online. I'll show you two real quick here. Give me a second. There's a website. Let me share a website. And when I share a website, I'm not telling you to go there because you should ask your parents' permission. Yeah, that's the right book. That's right, Henry. That's it. Okay. Just for the record, if I share a website, I'm not giving you permission to go start digging around on the internet and follow me. I'm just showing you where things are. There's a website. I'll share this with you real quick. And you'll see how cool this is. Just bear with me a second. I'll share my screen here. There's a website. There's Tufts University in America here. Tufts University has a website that's called the Perseus Digital Library. And this is a pretty cool site. This site is completely free to use, so you don't need to pay any membership or subscribe or anything like that. But I just want to show you what it has because it's pretty awesome if you're studying Greek and Latin. If you go to the collections, you can see they have Greek and Roman materials. And then they've got all these works. All of these Greek and Roman works. You'll also see that they've got that dictionary that I just shared with you on the website here. You can see Liddell and Scott right here, Greek English lexicon. So that's it. So if you click on that link, this is that dictionary available online. You can just scroll over here through all the words, which is a lot easier than trying to type stuff. But that dictionary is on this website online. But what's cool about this website, let's say they've got the New Testament on here. So if we were to go to the Gospel of John, that's Latin. Let me see if I can get the Greek pulled up. See, the Greek text is here. I don't know if you can see that, it's pretty small, but you can see they've got all of the Greek and not all, they've got many Greek and Latin works on the website. And what's really cool is every single word here is linked to a dictionary. You see that? Every single word is linked. So, I mean, if you want to know what a word means, what does logos mean, you can just click it and it opens up the dictionary. You can go further if you want to get into the dictionary. So it's all just clickable. The whole entire library, every word is clickable. Okay. So that's obviously a very powerful tool to use. But like I said, in our courses, you don't need to use anything like this. But if you get into real translation work in the future, and you'd like to find a place where you can get a Greek text online, let's say, for example, you want to study Homer. You want to study Homer in Greek. You want to actually read the Iliad in Greek. You know, here's the Greek text of Homer, and every single word is linked to the dictionary. Okay, so you can see how that would be helpful later on, but you want to get to a point where you can read without a dictionary because it would take too long to, you know, look up every word. You can't really study like that. So you've got to learn the languages, and then later on, like I'll use this just because there will be a certain word that I'm struggling with, and I'll just want to look up one word. You know what I mean? And I know I can come here and find one word, but so it's helpful, but you've got to learn the language before you can use a tool like this, because using the dictionary every word would be ridiculous. So Perseus, you can see the website is perseus.tufts.edu for that Perseus Digital Library. And this thing has been online since I was in college. So I was using this when I was 20 years old in college. This was like one of the first websites that existed. And I was using this in college, and it's still exactly as it was when I was using it. All right. So some tools to use. Anything else here? Koine Greek, just so you know, you'll hear people talk about classical and Koine. Don't listen to that stuff. There's no real difference. You know, Koine just means common. It means the same exact thing as Vulgate. You know, like Vulgate Latin means common Latin. Vulgar just means the common language. Koine and Vulgate, they mean the same thing. So Koine Greek is the Greek of the common people, the common language that was used, just like Vulgate Latin is the Latin that was common for Roman people. Classical Greek, classical Latin, Koine Greek, vulgar Latin, there's no difference. Usually, though, what happens is people will study like biblical Greek at a seminary, and they won't learn enough to be able to read classical Greek. They'll only learn what's needed to read biblical Greek. And so usually when people talk about Koine Greek, they can't read classical Greek. We're just going to study Greek. We're going to study classical Greek, and you'll be able to read Koine. We're going to study classical Latin. You'll be able to read the Vulgate. So we don't need to worry about that stuff. We're studying classical Greek and classical Latin. You can read everything. Okay. So you don't need to worry about it as if it's two different languages. That's not true. Okay. Any other questions here? Another resource before we leave here is, I'll share this. I think you guys still see my screen here. The Loeb Classical Library, published by Harvard University Press. You might see these green and red books in libraries. These green and red books, the red ones are Latin, the green ones are Greek. This is called the Loeb Classical Library. It's published by Harvard, and it's the Greek and Latin texts for like every classical work. So if you're going to a library, if you have a good library around and you want to find like, you know, a Greek book or a Latin book with the Latin text or the Greek text and English translation as well, the Loeb Classical Library, it's like 400 volumes. But what's cool also is it's available online, but you need to subscribe to it online. You know, I subscribe to it because I'm a geek, but I just want to show you. You see how it's the original language on one page and the translation on the other page. So when you get more serious about this stuff, you know that there are tools that people who study these things use. The Loeb Classical Library is one of them. You can buy the books in print. You know, I usually have some laying around, but you can also just subscribe online and have access to the whole library of Latin and Greek works. You can take notes on this. It's kind of like Kindle. You can like highlight things and take notes and do all that nerdy stuff. But Loeb Classical Library from Harvard, that's another source for classical studies, both Greek and Latin. They have church fathers and all kinds of stuff. If we go through here, we'll probably find St. Augustine. Let me just see. You know, St. Augustine is on here. They've got City of God, Confessions, Letters of St. Augustine. So if you want to read the Confessions in Latin, you've got to subscribe. Hold on a second. Let me log in. So if you wanted to read St. Augustine's works in Latin with an English translation, it's in the Loeb. So there's lots of tools, but you've got to get yourself to a certain level where the tools become useful. Okay. Lots of tools. All right. Any other questions? Any other questions? If there's somebody you want to ask these questions to, it's probably me, because I'm as classically nerdy as they get. What's the library called? It's Loeb. You're talking about this one I'm talking about here, the Loeb Classical Library. And again, if you know a website like archive.org, you can find older editions of these Loeb books that are available for free on archive.org. So, there's so many resources. It's really crazy how much is available. But as we go, if you guys take these studies seriously and want to get further and further, we'll just, I'll help you to learn about all this stuff. You can study this stuff your whole life if you want to. So anyway, you got the Perseus Digital Library, which is from Tufts University. Perseus .tufts.edu. That's the Perseus library, that other one I showed you. The dictionary was the Liddell and Scott Greek English Lexicon. And really, that's like the only stuff I even use. You really don't need too much. That's really all I use. If I don't know a word, I usually use my dictionary. And other than that, if I need to see something, I might use the Loeb Library or Perseus. That's it. Pretty simple. Anything else before we wrap up here? And like I said, you can study this stuff for your whole life. You can make a career out of classical studies. One of the reasons why it's possible is because there are so few people studying it, that it's a field that really is like begging for students. Lots of opportunities. And it's cool too. The coolest sections of every library are the classical sections of the library. You get to hang out. I got to hang out in the basement of my college library. It was like my own little world. I was like Gollum down there all by myself. Anything else today? If not, let's get working on these lessons. Let's get these lessons done, get assignments submitted. We've got to make progress in these courses so we can get into the fun stuff. We've got to get through level 1 stuff, get into level 2 stuff. And if you need help, just bring your questions to our weekly meetings, because we can turn microphones on and stuff like that, and just read and talk about it. So get to work on the online courses. Meet me each week, and if these studies intensify, if you guys really get into it, we can arrange more meetings and stuff like that. I'm willing to do that. So let's just see how it goes, okay? And we'll study all these languages, figure all this stuff out. So let me know what you'd like to do, but we'll wrap up for today, and I'll catch you guys next week, okay? All right. God bless. Take care, guys. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you guys for coming.